I can't believe they really did it. They actually booked a flight, rented a massive beachside villa, and planned an entire 14-day tropical getaway for the whole family without saying a single word to me. Imagine sitting at your kitchen table, scrolling through Instagram, only to see your own mother, your two sisters, and even your black sheep brother-in-law all clinking glasses of champagne in a VIP airport lounge while you're stuck at home wondering why no one has answered your texts in 3 days. The caption on my sister's post read, "Finally, the whole family together for the trip of a lifetime." And it felt like a physical blow to the chest because apparently, I wasn't part of that whole family anymore. Was I wrong to feel like they'd essentially erased my existence? Or would you have felt the same cold realization that you were the only one left behind in the dark? Seriously, tell me, if you saw your entire family celebrating without you, would you stay quiet and take it? Or would you do what I did and let the secret I'd been keeping for 3 years finally blow their little vacation right out of the water? This whole mess didn't start at the airport, though. It started years ago with the way my family viewed me as the reliable but boring one. See, I've always been the person they called when they needed a favor. Whether it was my sister Sarah needing a free babysitter for her 3 rowdy kids, or my mom needing someone to drive her 2 hours away for a specialized doctor's appointment, because she didn't want to bother my other siblings. I was the one who stayed behind, worked a steady corporate job, and never made waves. My siblings, on the other hand, were the stars. Sarah was the ambitious one who was always starting a new business venture that inevitably failed, and my brother Mark was the artist who lived off my parents' kindness while he found himself. I didn't mind being the stable one for a while, but over the last few years, the dynamic shifted from me being helpful to me being an afterthought. It was like I was a piece of furniture in their lives, functional, always there, but completely ignored until someone needed to sit down. I remember one specific Thanksgiving where I spent 6 hours in the kitchen prepping the turkey and all the sides while Sarah and Mark sat in the living room arguing about which Netflix show to watch. When dinner was finally served, they didn't even say thank you. They just complained that the stuffing was a little too dry, and then asked if I could wash the dishes quickly, so we could play board games. It was that constant, subtle lack of respect that started to wear me down. I began to realize that they didn't see me as a person with my own feelings, dreams, or exhaustion. I was just the utility family member. I was the safety net they never expected to break. The secret I mentioned? It started 3 years ago when I was offered a remote position for a tech firm based out of Europe. They didn't just offer me a job. They offered me a salary that was nearly triple what I was making before, plus equity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just doing okay. I was becoming wealthy. But because I knew my family, I knew exactly what would happen if I told them. Sarah would have asked for a loan for her next failed boutique. Mark would have expected me to pay his rent. And my mom would have guilt me into paying for every family dinner, holiday, and emergency. So, I lied. I told them I'd taken a pay cut to work at a smaller, more flexible firm. I kept living in my modest 2-bedroom apartment, drove my old sedan, and put every extra cent into investments and a secret savings account. I wanted to see if they actually loved me for me, or if they only valued what I could provide. For 3 long years, I lived a double life. On weekdays, I was managing million-dollar software deployments and attending high-stakes board meetings via Zoom. On weekends, I was the guy who drove mom to the grocery store to save her $5 in gas money. I even pretended to struggle sometimes, mentioning how inflation was hitting my grocery bill, just to see their reaction. Sarah would just roll her eyes and say, "Maybe if you were more driven like me, you'd have a side hustle." The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. I watched them blow money they didn't have on designer bags and flashy cars, all while I was quietly building a portfolio that could retire my entire bloodline twice over. The answer came 6 months ago when my mom started talking about a big family reunion trip. At every Sunday dinner, they'd talk about it in vague terms. "Wouldn't it be nice to go to Hawaii?" Sarah would say, or, "I really need a beach," Mark would chime in. I'd join the conversation, suggesting places we could go and mentioning my availability. They'd just nod and change the subject. I thought they were just being indecisive. Little did I know, they had a secret group chat titled The Real Family Vacation that I wasn't invited to. They planned the whole thing behind my back because, as I later found out through a leaked screenshot from a cousin, Sarah had told everyone that I was too broke and too boring to enjoy a luxury trip, and that I'd just kill the vibe with my budget concerns. They didn't even give me the chance to say I'd pay my own way. They just decided I wasn't worth the invite. I found out later that Sarah had actually convinced my mom that leaving me out was doing me a favor. She told her that if I came along, I'd feel guilty for not being able to afford the fancy dinners they were planning, and it would make the whole trip awkward. They framed their exclusion as an act of mercy, which is probably the most insulting thing I've ever heard. The day I saw those photos on Instagram, something in me finally snapped. I wasn't even sad anymore. I was purely, vibrantly furious. I watched as they posted photos of their $1,500 a night villa in Maui. A villa they clearly couldn't afford, which meant my mom had probably dipped into her retirement savings to fund Sarah and Mark's portions. They were living it up on a lie, while I was sitting on enough money to buy that entire villa if I wanted to. I realized then that the reliable version of me was dead. If they wanted a vacation without me, I would give them exactly what they wanted, but I was going to make sure they knew exactly what they had walked away from. I spent that entire afternoon just staring at my bank statement, and then at their smiling faces on my phone screen. I thought about all the times I'd fixed Sarah's car for free, all the times I'd bailed Mark out of debt, and all the times I'd put my own life on hold to be the good son. It was over. So here's where things stood. They were 3 days into a 2-week luxury trip, thinking I was at home eating ramen and checking my bank balance. Meanwhile, I was packing a suitcase with clothes I'd bought but never wore in front of them, designer pieces, high-end gear, the works. I booked a first-class ticket to the exact same island, but I didn't book a room at their villa. Instead, I booked the penthouse suite at the most exclusive resort on the other side of the island. Before I tell you about the moment I walked into their private dinner and revealed the truth, I need to ask, was I being petty, or was this justified? I had spent years being their safety net, and they threw me away the second they thought I had nothing to offer. Before we get to the climax, pause and drop a comment below. If your family left you behind like this, would you have stayed home and cried? Or would you have crashed the party with a vengeance? Seriously, I want to know if I'm the villain here, or if this is just karma finally coming home to roost. I landed in Maui looking like a completely different person. I had this newfound confidence fueled by pure adrenaline. I knew they were planning a grand family dinner at a famous high-end restaurant on the 5th night of their trip. Sarah had posted the reservation card on her story to brag. I showed up 20 minutes after their reservation started. I saw them from across the room. They were all dressed up, laughing, and looking like the perfect family. My mom looked so happy, and Sarah was holding court, probably telling some story about how hard she worked to get there. I stayed back for a moment, just observing. It was surreal. They looked so unbothered by my absence. There wasn't an empty chair at the table. They hadn't even bothered to pretend there was a spot for me. I didn't walk up to them immediately. Instead, I sat at the bar right in their line of sight, and ordered the most expensive bottle of vintage wine on the menu. I waited. It only took 5 minutes for Mark to spot me. He did a double take, nudged Sarah, and then the whole table went silent. The look of pure confusion on their faces was better than any vacation I could have planned. My mom was the first to stand up. She walked over, looking baffled, and asked, "What are you doing here? How could you afford to fly here?" I didn't even stand up. I just took a slow sip of my wine, looked her in the eye, and said, "The same way I afforded the penthouse at the Grand Wailea, Mom. Hard work." Sarah came over then, her face turning a bright shade of red. She tried to play it off like a joke, saying, "Oh, you followed us. That's so creepy. You know we didn't invite you because we didn't want you to feel bad about the cost." That was the moment I pulled out the secret. I laughed, a loud, genuine laugh, and told her, "Sarah, I make more in a month than you've made in the last 5 years. I didn't follow you. I'm actually enjoying a vacation I didn't have to beg Mom to pay for." The silence that followed was heavy. I told them everything. I told them about the job, the salary, the investments, and the fact that I had been planning to surprise the whole family with a fully paid trip to Europe next year. Until I saw their Instagram posts. I watched the greed instantly replace the confusion in their eyes. Sarah's tone changed in a heartbeat. "Wait, you're rich? Why didn't you tell us? We're family. You should have helped me with the boutique. Mark started asking about investment opportunities, and my mom started crying, saying she only left me out because she didn't want to stress me. I then pulled out my phone and showed them my actual portfolio. The numbers they never thought I'd see in my lifetime. Sarah's eyes nearly popped out of her head. Mark literally dropped his fork. My mom tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled it away. I explained that for 3 years, I had been waiting for them to treat me like a brother and a son instead of a tool, and they had failed every single test. I told them that the broken brother they were trying to protect from the stress of a vacation was actually the only one in the room who wasn't living on borrowed time and borrowed money. I didn't buy it for a second. I looked at all of them, the people who had treated me like a second-class citizen my entire life, and I felt nothing but peace. I told them that since they were so worried about my vibe and my budget, they could continue their vacation exactly as they planned it, without me. I paid for my wine, left a massive tip for the bartender, and walked out while Sarah was still shouting about how selfish I was for keeping my success a secret. As I walked out, I heard Sarah yell, "You owe us this. Your family." And that was the final nail in the coffin. The entitlement was bone deep. They didn't feel bad for hurting me. They felt bad for missing out on my money. The aftermath was chaotic. My phone blew up for the rest of the week with apologies, followed by demands, followed by more guilt trips. Sarah sent me a 2,000-word email explaining why her boutique failed because I didn't invest in her. Mark texted me a list of business ideas he had, all requiring a 6-figure startup cost. My mom tried the soft approach, leaving voicemails about how misunderstandings happen in every family, and how we should put this behind us and enjoy the rest of the trip together. They tried to come to my resort, but I had them blocked from the guest list. I spent the rest of my 10 days in Maui in total luxury, alone and completely happy. I went scuba diving, took a private helicopter tour of the island, and ate at 5-star restaurants where I didn't have to worry about anyone complaining about the price of the appetizers. It was the first time in my life I felt truly free. When they got home, they found out that my mom's credit card had been maxed out because Sarah and Mark had upgraded their rooms, thinking I would eventually step in and pay the bill. Apparently, Sarah had convinced the hotel that my brother is a millionaire and he's staying across the island. He'll cover the incidentals. The hotel didn't buy it. They're now scrambling to pay back the debt, and for the first time in my life, I'm not answering the phone to help them. I've moved into a new house they don't have the address to, and I'm finally living my life for myself. I also changed my phone number, and only gave it to a few close friends and a cousin who had actually tried to warn me about the trip. My mom has tried to reach out through other relatives, claiming she's heartbroken. But those same relatives told me she's actually just stressed because she had to go back to work part-time to cover the credit card bills Sarah racked up. It's a mess, but it's a mess of their own making. I realized that by always being the reliable one, I was actually enabling their bad behavior. By stepping away, I'm finally forcing them to grow up. Looking back, that secret was the best thing I ever kept. It showed me exactly who my family was when they thought I had nothing to give them. It hurts to know they didn't want me there, but it feels incredible to know I don't need them to be happy. I spent so many years thinking my value was tied to how much I could do for them. But now I know my value is simply who I am. If there's a lesson here, it's that being the reliable one shouldn't mean being a doormat. Sometimes you have to let people lose you so they can finally see what you are worth. It's a hard lesson to learn, and it's even harder to implement. But once you do, the world opens up in ways you never expected. I'm finally traveling the world, but this time, I'm choosing my own family. People who love me whether I'm the stable one, or the one who needs a shoulder to lean on. Like this video if you think I did the right thing by leaving them with their own bills. And honestly, let me know in the comments. Would you have paid for their dinner that night just to keep the peace? Or would you have walked out like I did? Do you think blood is always thicker than water? Or does respect have to be earned, even in a family? Subscribe for more stories about people finally standing up for themselves. And share your thoughts on this whole mess below. I'll see you all in the next story.